Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Everyday Love Stories, where we revisit memories and real-life tales of love that may be simple but never ordinary. These are the kinds of stories that stay with us, sometimes for a lifetime. Today, we invite you to listen to a true story, touching and tender, about an elderly man, once a talented dancer, who carried a lost love in his heart for decades, until one day he found her again in the twilight years of life, in a quiet nursing home. They say time has a way of softening the edges of memory, but some memories, they don't fade, they dance, like echoes in an empty ballroom. My name is Frank. I'm 84 years old, and for most of my life I was a dancer. Not just someone who loved music, but a man whose feet lived for the rhythm, swing, jazz, waltz, you name it. The dance floor was where I felt most alive, but these days I live in a quiet house at the edge of town. My wife, Margaret, passed away 8 years ago. We had a good life, simple, kind, but ever since she left, the silence has settled in like dust, always there, even when the sun is shining. Sometimes, when the house gets too quiet, I pull out the old records, Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Benny Goodman, and I let the music fill the room like it used to. And just for a few minutes I close my eyes and I'm young again, spinning across a wooden floor in shiny shoes, holding someone close under the low lights. But the woman I always see in those memories, she isn't Margaret. She's Evelyn. And I met in 1953. We were barely 20, wild, free, and crazy about each other. She had this way of laughing that made every man in the room turn, but when we danced, it was like the world faded away. We didn't need words. The music spoke for us. We competed in small local contests and we always won. But more than that, we danced for the joy of it. In the park, in the rain, even in the kitchen when no one was watching. We planned a future once. But life doesn't always dance to your rhythm. My father fell ill. I had to leave town. Evelyn's family moved out west. We wrote for a while, then time did what time does, scattered us like leaves in the wind. We lost touch. She was my first love, and in some ways my deepest. Even after I married Margaret, a part of me always wondered, where did she go? Then last winter, I got a letter. Not an email, not a call, a real letter. The envelope was slightly yellowed with neat handwriting and a return address I didn't recognize. It came from Willow Pine's retirement home. Inside was a brief note from a nurse named Claire. She said she was taking care of a resident named Evelyn Monroe. She said Evelyn sometimes spoke of a man named Frank, a dancer, someone who once spun her around like she weighed nothing at all. She said Evelyn's memory wasn't what it used to be, but whenever music played, especially swing or slow jazz, her eyes lit up. And sometimes she whispered my name. I sat there for a long time, holding that letter in my hands like it might crumble if I blinked too hard. Could it really be her? After all these years, I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Hope? Fear? Grief? But what I did know deep in my old, tired bones was this. If Evelyn was still somewhere out there, still dancing, even if only in her mind, then maybe, just maybe, we had one last song left in us. You know, it's funny. They say youth passes in a blur, and it does. But when I think about those years with Evelyn, every detail comes back in colour. The scent of her perfume, the way the floorboards creaked beneath our shoes, even the warm hum of the band tuning their instruments before the night began. Those memories aren't faded, They're vivid, alive. It was the summer of 1953 when I first saw her. I was working part-time loading crates at the train station, and every Friday night I'd clean myself up and head down to the Marigold Lounge, a cozy little dance hall just off Main Street. It had string lights over the entrance and a neon sign that buzzed faintly. But once you walked through those doors, it was like stepping into a different world. The music wrapped around you like silk, and no matter how tired I was from work, my feet came alive. That night, she walked in wearing a sky-blue dress that flowed like water when she moved. Her hair was pinned up, but a single curl had slipped free and danced against her cheek every time she laughed. And oh, she laughed like the world had never touched her. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was dancing with a friend, nothing serious, just playful little steps. But I saw the way her body listened to the rhythm. She wasn't just moving to the beat. She was telling a story with every spin, every sway. I gathered the courage to ask her for a dance. "May I said, holding out my hand. She looked at me, right into me, and smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." And just like that, we began. We were electric together on that floor. Swing, foxtrot, even a slow waltz. It all came easy between us. It felt like we'd danced together. In another life, people started watching, clapping, moving aside to give us space. I remember the band leader tipping his hat to us after a particularly wild swing set, saying, "You two are something else," and we were just kids, but in that moment, we were stars. After that night, we became inseparable. Saturday, picnics in the park, late-night milkshakes at the diner, Sundays at church where she'd sit beside me and hum along to the hymns, and every Friday, without fail, we danced, sometimes in public, sometimes in her mother's living room, with the radio turned low, her head resting on my shoulder. Her name was Evelyn Monroe. Daughter of a local tailor, the kind of girl who always wrote thank-you notes and remembered birthdays. She wanted to study music, dreamed of teaching piano to children someday, but she also had fire in her, that rare kind of quiet confidence that made people stop and listen when she spoke. We talked about the future, the two of us, what it would be like to marry, to have a little house with a porch swing, maybe kids who'd learn to dance before they could walk. I was going to save up to buy her a proper ring. Nothing flashy, just something real, something lasting, but real life had other plans. That fall, my father got sick, really sick. My mother couldn't handle it alone, so I had to leave town to help. I told Evelyn I'd be back in a few months. She cried, but she understood. We promised to write, and we did. For a while. Her letters were like sunshine on paper. She'd described the town, the people at the Marigold, even how she was teaching. Danced to local kids on Saturdays. I wrote back every chance I got, always ending with, "Save me the next dance." But months turned into a year. My father passed, and I stayed to help my mother. By the time I was ready to return, Evelyn's letters had grown less frequent. Then one day, they stopped altogether. I later heard her family had moved west, maybe California. There was talk of her getting engaged. I never knew for sure. Life just moved on. I did too. Eventually, I met Margaret a few years later. She was kind, grounded. She didn't dance much, but she liked to laugh, and we built a good, stable life together. We raised 2 boys, worked hard, made a home, and I loved her, truly. But there was always a small, quiet room in my heart that remained closed, not out of disloyalty, but out of something gentler. Reverence, maybe. Memory. Every now and then a song would come on the radio, at last by Etta James or Benny Goodman's Moonglow, and I'd feel Evelyn's hand in mine again. My feet would twitch with old instincts and I'd smile, remembering how light she felt in my arms, how she'd whisper the count under her breath when we were learning a new step. We were never promised forever. We were given a moment, and for years I thought that moment had passed, until that letter arrived last winter. It changed everything. Getting old, it sneaks up on you. One day, you're tying your shoes without a second thought. The next, you're out of breath just walking to the mailbox. Things start to slip. Names, dates, the reason you walked into a room. The world, once so fast and colourful, begins to slow down and fade into softer shades. After Margaret passed, the house felt like a shell. Our boys, Michael and Drew, live in different states now. Good men, busy lives. They call, they visit when they can, but it's not the same as hearing laughter down the hallway or smelling Sunday breakfast on the stove. The silence in this house, it's not just quiet. It's loud. A heavy kind of quiet. Some evenings, I sit by the window with an old record spinning low on the turntable. I close my eyes and imagine the music lifting me out of my chair, back onto the dance floor. In my mind, my legs are strong again, my back straight. I move with purpose. Grace. I see Evelyn's face, her smile glowing in the low light, her eyes locked with mine, telling me without words, don't let go yet, but then the song ends and the room returns. And I'm just a tired old man with worn-out shoes and too many yesterdays. It's strange. As you get older, you start to feel less like you're living forward and more like you're looking back. I've been doing a lot of that lately, thinking about people I've lost, choices I made, and Evelyn, she keeps rising to the surface, like a melody I can't forget. When that letter arrived from the nurse at Willow Pines, it shook something loose in me. I'd long stopped hoping, but there it was, her name, written in ink, still alive in this world. Still whispering my name. When the music plays. For a few days, I left the letter on the kitchen table, unsure what to do with it. I'd pick it up, read it again, then put it back down. A part of me was scared. What if she didn't remember me? What if she was too far, gone lost in a fog I couldn't reach through? But the other part, the dancer in me, said, if there's even the smallest chance, you owe her that last song. So I packed a small bag, took my best jacket out of the closet, navy blue, the one with the soft satin lining. It still fits, mostly. My knees complained, my back warned me not to, but I stood up straight, just like I used to before a performance. I called a cab and asked the driver to take me to Willow Pines retirement home. It wasn't a grand journey, not in miles, just a few towns over, but in my heart it felt like crossing oceans. The closer we got, the tighter my chest felt, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of everything unspoken, the years we lost, the words we never got to say. I kept thinking, will she know me? Will I know her? And most of all, what if we still have one dance left in us? The car pulled into a quiet driveway lined with blooming trees. The building was modest, wrapped in ivy, and painted in calming blues and whites. A nurse came out to greet me. Claire, the one who wrote the letter? She smiled gently, as if she already knew why I had come, not just for Evelyn, but for a piece of myself I had tucked away long ago. As she led me down the hall, I could hear music playing softly from a distant room. It was Benny Goodman, and in that moment I knew this story wasn't over yet. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought she'd be sitting by a window, sunlight in her hair, looking just as I remembered her. Or maybe I feared I wouldn't recognize her at all. That time would have done its cruel work, smoothing over the details of her face until there was nothing left to stir the heart. But the truth was something far more beautiful and far more human. Claire led me down a hallway lined with framed pictures, smiling residents, old newspaper clippings, faded photographs of dances and community events. Somewhere along the way, my hands started to shake. I tried to hide it, but she noticed. She gently placed her hand on my arm and said, "She's been asking about you. Not every day, but when the music plays, she always says your name." My throat tightened. We turned the corner into a quiet sitting room. There, by the window, was a woman in a pale lavender sweater, her white hair pulled back into a loose bun. She was looking out at the garden, humming softly to herself, a tune I knew by heart. It was Stardust. I stopped in my tracks. She turned slowly, sensing our presence. Her eyes found mine. For a moment, nothing happened. Just stillness. And then, "Frank?" Her voice was softer than I remembered, but there it was. My name, carried across more than 5 decades, spoken like it had been waiting patiently all this time. I nodded, unable to speak. She blinked. A smile, hesitant but real, tugged at her lips. You came. I took a step forward, then another. My knees nearly gave out, but I reached her side. She raised her hand and I held it in mine. It was warm. Familiar. "You still have those dancer's hands," she whispered. "And you," I said, my voice cracking, "still remember our song?" She laughed, a quiet, breathy sound that made my heart ache. Some things, they don't fade. We sat together side by side as the afternoon light spilled into the room. Claire quietly turned on an old radio in the corner, letting the music play low. Benny Goodman, Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole. Each song pulled at threads I didn't even know were still attached. Evelyn spoke slowly, searching for words sometimes, pausing mid-sentence. Claire told me earlier she had early-stage dementia. Some days were clearer than others. But even with the haze, she remembered the rhythm of our story. "Do you remember?" she asked. "The night we danced the Charleston so hard my shoe flew off?" I laughed. "You hit a waiter in the head, and he spilled punch all over your white shirt," she added, giggling. "You were mortified. You were charming." It went on like that for a while. We talked about our Friday nights at the Marigold, about her piano students, about my letters. She said she kept the first 10 I sent, carried them with her for years. "Why did you stop writing?" I asked gently. Her eyes clouded for a second. "I didn't want to. But my father got the last one. He never gave it to me. I only found out later." My heart sank. "I thought you'd moved on, that you forgot me." "I never did," she said, reaching for my hand again. "I married, had children, but I never forgot." Silence sat between us then, not uncomfortable, just full of all the years we missed, full of what-ifs and what-could-have-beens, but also peace. We were here now. That had to count for something. A song began to play. Moon River, she turned to me, her eyes bright, despite the lines of time etched across her face. Do you still remember our steps? I never forgot them, I whispered. She smiled. Then dance with me, Frank. We rose slowly. Two old bodies, aching and stiff, but guided by something far stronger than time, muscle memory, and love. She leaned into me, her hand on my shoulder. Mine. On her waist. We didn't do a grand routine. No sweeping turns or fancy footwork. Just a simple sway back and forth to a melody older than both of us. But in that moment, I swear, we were 19 again. The music carried us, lifted us, reminded us. A few staff members passed by, paused, smiled, and moved on. No one interrupted. They seemed to know this was something sacred. Her cheek rested against mine. I closed my eyes. You came back for me, she murmured. I always meant to. She pulled back slightly, looking up at me. It's not too late, you know. I kissed her forehead. No, it isn't. When the music ended, we stood still, holding each other like the past had never happened. And in that moment I realized we weren't dancing just for the past. We were dancing for right now, for what remained, for love that had waited patiently through the years, through silence, through change, and it had remembered the steps all along. A few days after our reunion, I found myself sitting in the garden behind willow pines, holding Evelyn's hand as we watched the wind sway through the lilac bushes. She had been quieter that day, a little slower to respond, but she still hummed. When a familiar song came through the open window behind us, that hum, soft, steady, sparked something inside me. A thought, a longing, maybe even a farewell. That evening I approached Claire. I want to give her something, I said. Not just for her, for everyone here. One last dance. Her eyes lit up. You mean like a little party? No, I said, shaking my head gently. A night. A real night. Like the old days. With music and soft lights. Something beautiful. One last dance for the two of us, but shared with everyone who still remembers how it felt to be in love, even if just for a song. She smiled. We'll make it happen, Frank. And they did. The staff and volunteers at Willow Pines were extraordinary. In just a few days, they turned the dining hall into a ballroom, well, as close to one as we could hope for. Strings of warm white lights were draped across the ceiling like stardust. Tables were pushed to the sides. A phonograph stood proud. In the corner, alongside a newer speaker to play digital recordings, a punch bowl sat in the back, flanked by paper cups and a small tray of cookies. There were even fresh flowers in the vases, lavender and yellow tulips. That night, as I helped Evelyn into her soft silver dress, she looked at me with wide, glassy eyes and said, "Am I still your best dance partner?" I laughed. "You were always my only one." She chuckled, then paused. "I might forget some steps." "Then I'll carry us both," I said, offering her my arm. The room was already buzzing when we arrived. Residents dressed in their finest, cardigans, ties, pearl, earrings, even a few fedoras. Some sat in wheelchairs, others stood with canes, but everyone smiled like they were young again. When the first notes of Unforgettable by Nat King Cole drifted into the room, a hush fell over the crowd. Claire stepped up to the mic and gently introduced us. Tonight, we are honored to witness something special, a story that's waited more than 50 years for its next chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, Frank and Evelyn. All eyes turned to us. My legs trembled, more from nerves than age, but I led Evelyn onto the makeshift dance floor. She held on to me tighter than before. I could feel the fragility in her touch, but also the fire still burning deep beneath it, a familiar rhythm. We began to sway. Slowly, carefully. We weren't the dancers we once were. Our feet shuffled more than glided. But the way she looked at me like I was still the young man in that pressed suit and polished shoes made me forget. The stiffness in my joints, the pain in my back, the decades between then and now. We danced, just the two of us, for one song, for 1,000 memories. I whispered softly, "Do you hear the music, Evie?" She nodded. Always. I could feel the room holding its breath around us. Some smiled, some wiped away tears. And when the chorus swelled, I saw Mr. Jacobs, 97 and mostly blind, grab his wife's hand and pull her close. Another couple stood, holding each other and rocking gently to the beat. Even the nurses joined in, stepping between tables, some singing along under their breath. In that moment, time folded in on itself. The wrinkles on our faces faded. The years we lost disappeared. We were all just people in love, with a song, a memory, a person. When the music ended, the room erupted in soft applause, not loud, not rowdy, just heartfelt, a kind of reverence. Evelyn leaned into me, her cheek against my chest. "Was that our last one?" she asked quietly. I looked around at the faces glowing in the dim light, at the way the past and present blurred in the eyes of those watching. "Yes," I said, kissing her hair, "but it was the best one." Someone snapped a photo just then, us in the middle of the floor, surrounded by old souls remembering how it felt to be young. That picture now sits by my bedside. Later that night, as I helped Evelyn back to her room, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for not forgetting me." "I never could," I said. She smiled and drifted off to sleep with that smile still on her lips. And I sat beside her a while longer, listening to the music still playing softly down the hall. One more slow tune, one more gentle reminder that love, real love, doesn't fade, it just waits. Waits until you're ready, until you're brave enough to ask for one last dance. It happened quietly. One morning, just a few weeks after our dance, I came to visit Evelyn like I always did. The sun was just beginning to stretch across the lawn, golden and soft the way she liked it. I brought her favourite, fresh apple scones from the bakery 2 blocks down, still warm. But when I arrived, Claire was waiting by the door. She didn't need to say anything. The look in her eyes said it all. Evelyn had passed peacefully in her sleep the night before. I stood there for a while, just breathing. My heart didn't break the way I thought it would. Instead, it unfolded, slowly, like a letter I had carried, in my coat pocket for decades, one I had finally read again line by line. They let me sit with her, just the two of us like always. She looked peaceful, her hands folded neatly, a slight smile still lingering on her face, like she'd fallen asleep to a melody only she could hear. I held her hand and whispered, "Thank you. Not just for coming back into my life, but for never leaving my heart." The days after that blurred together. People offered kind words, soft hugs, quiet understanding. But I didn't feel lost, not the way I used to. because for the first time in years my loneliness didn't feel empty. It felt full, filled with memories, music, and moments I never thought I'd get again. I still come to Willow Pine sometimes, not because I have to, but because I want to. I sit in the garden where she used to hum, or join the others for music night. They still talk about that dance. Some even say it brought something back to life in the whole place, and maybe it did. Because here's the truth I've learned. Love doesn't care how many birthdays you've had. It doesn't care if your hands shake or your memory slips or your knees don't bend like they used to. Love remembers the rhythm. It waits, quietly, patiently, until you're ready to dance again. I'm 90 now. My bones ache more than they don't, and I move slower than ever. But every once in a while, when the right song plays, I stand up from my chair, close my eyes, and sway. Just a little. Just enough to feel her near. Some nights I even talk to her. Evie, I'll say, you were my first step, and my last. I used to be afraid of endings, of being forgotten, of dying alone, but not anymore, because the end isn't just silence. It's a soft song fading into something greater. And Evelyn, she gave me that ending, not in sorrow, but in grace. She reminded me that even in the twilight of life, there is still beauty, still meaning, still a reason to get up and sway to the music. People often ask if I regret anything, and the answer is no, because I got one more dance. I got to say goodbye, not with words, but with movement, with closeness, with music. And that's more than most people ever get. So if you're listening to this wherever you are, maybe in a quiet room, maybe with someone you love nearby, I hope you remember this. It's never too late to find your song. It's never too late to hold someone close, and it's never ever too late to dance. We grew old, but dancing never did. Just like love. As we come to the end of Frank and Evelyn's story, I invite you to pause and reflect, not just on their final dance, but on your own journey through love, loss, and memory. Who was the Evelyn in your life? When was the last time you danced, not just with your feet, but with your heart? Have you told someone you love them lately, or sat quietly with an old song and let it take you back? Sometimes we think the best parts of life are behind us, but maybe, just maybe, something beautiful still awaits. An unexpected letter, a warm smile across the room, one last dance in a quiet place. Because love never ages. And as Frank said, we grew old, but dancing never did. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of something precious, or simply made you smile, please consider subscribing to our channel, Everyday Love Stories. Here we share true, soul-stirring tales of connection, hope, and second chances, stories that remind us all it's never too late to feel deeply, love again, and be seen. Hit subscribe, give us a like, and share this story with someone who needs a little reminder that love still lives in the quiet corners of life. Until next time, keep listening, keep remembering, and above all, keep dancing with love.